Vanakkam. Welcome to this course on classics in neuroscience. We have been looking at classic Nobel Prize winning works in the field of neuroscience. In particular, we have been looking at the classic Nobel Prize winning works of Santiago Ramon y Cajal. In this video, we will look at a crucial tipping point that came in the career of Santiago Ramon y Cajal, which was the chance meeting. Actually, it's a planned meeting. He went to a conference in Berlin where he happened to meet with Albert Kolliker, and how Kolliker supported, how Kolliker was actually amazed by Cajal's studies. What Cajal himself called as his Palm Sunday years. What are the Palm Sunday years? These are the Palm Sunday is the day when Jesus Christ returned successfully back to Jerusalem. So, when someone says that they are having their Palm Sunday days or Palm Sunday weeks, months or years, that essentially means the age or the time of redemption, the time when they victoriously and successfully return back to their place or something of that sort. So, what Cajal termed as his Palm Sunday years and his crucial, critical contributory years and what he did in those years. And the brilliant synthesis of Heinrich Wilhelm Gottfried von Waldeyer-Hartz, shortly called as Waldeyer, a very long name, Heinrich Wilhelm Gottfried von Waldeyer-Hartz, a very long name, which reminds me of how Cajal used to take attendance in his class. It's also mentioned in one of his books. So, he goes and it's a very long name and he says, let us say this Waldeyer was one of the students. Imagine that this long name, a person with a long name was one of the students in his class. He will say, okay, Heinrich Wilhelm Gottfried, etc., like that. Famously, he did not say the entire name of his students in the class. This is recorded and it's mentioned. Yes. So, likewise, this is a very long name, Heinrich Wilhelm Gottfried von Waldeyer-Hartz. The rest of the lecture, I will simply be calling him as Waldeyer. Okay, this is how we will address him. The brilliant synthesis that was provided by Waldeyer, who coined the term, practically the term neuron, and how it affected Cajal's research and his approach. Recall that von Kolliker a few years ago had visited the Spanish Museum of Natural Sciences, where he found that the microscope was still in the packaging, was still in the mahogany packaging. Kolliker did not have a very favorable view of Spanish science, in particular Spanish histology or neuroscience. He did not have a very high view. Kolliker at that time was practically the authority, the towering authority in the field of histology, and he was like the one person who has practically seen all the types of cells in the body through the lens of a microscope. This is the person who practically knows structures, almost every type of cell and all the details. He was like the towering authority, like the demigod, so to speak, of the field of histology. This is von Kolliker for you. Cajal got an opportunity to travel to Berlin to present his work in a conference. Cajal did not have the money for the travel. In the good old days, governments did not provide support for conference travel. Let us be honest, even today, governments do not provide a lot of money for travel, it's still restricted. Cajal practically spent his own savings to travel to Berlin because he posited that he will be in a position to meet with Kolliker and other such towering figures, and he was also hoping that he will be able to meet with Golgi, where he can engage in a debate, or he expected to see Golgi and engage in a debate about reticular theory versus the independence of neurons. This is something that Cajal expected. So, he decided to travel on his own account with his own money. He took his microscope and his samples to Berlin. So, Cajal practically dragged Kolliker to his demonstration. Everybody wanted to impress Kolliker. He was such a towering figure. Everybody wanted to impress Kolliker. So, until Kolliker visited the stall of Cajal, nobody bothered to check Cajal, because Cajal was this was from Spain. Spain is not a favorable destination or a location or a destination that is looked up favorably by the academics in the good old days. Germany, France, Britain were. So, nobody bothered. Everybody was like, hey, how are you? And then moving on. Cajal practically dragged Kolliker to his stall and showed his samples and his slides. As Kolliker looked through the lens of Cajal's microscope, Kolliker was thoroughly enchanted. He uses the word enchanted. Kolliker said, I have discovered you. See, scientists become famous by discovering phenomena or types of cells or some particular thing. Kolliker prided himself of having discovered Cajal. So, Kolliker said to Cajal, I have discovered you and I wish to make my discovery known in Germany. Everybody in Germany should know about you and your work. Such was the fineness, such was the refinement of Cajal's samples that they decisively showed the independence of neurons. So, Matthias Duell later turned Cajal's drawings of the nervous system into giant wall charts and used them for his lectures. And when he gave that lecture, he said, this time light comes to us from the south, from Spain, the country of the sun. Matthias Duell was the leading authority in anatomy in Paris, in France. This meeting in Berlin, in Germany, was a turning point in Cajal's academic and personal life, so much that his papers started getting translated from Spanish into German. Two of Cajal's papers were translated into German and published in Anatomischer Anzeiger, which was among the most prestigious journals of the time. Recall, there are no Sundays in nature. So, Cajal's work through the nights, through the weekends, actually paid off when his papers were being published in the most prestigious journals like Anatomischer Anzeiger. Cajal called his 2 years, 1890 and 1891, as his Palm Sundays, because he was super productive in those years. 1890 and 1891 were his Palm Sundays. In 1890 alone, he published 19 monographs. Recall that he just started working on the central nervous system in 1887, and only starting in 1888, he started focusing entirely, exclusively on the central nervous system, on the nervous system. So, that means in 1887 he was also doing some other studies. In 1888, starting 1888, he was focusing entirely on the nervous system. Within 3 years of starting his work on the nervous system, he had practically conquered the cerebellum. He revealed a detailed structure of the cerebellum. As an anatomist histologist, that was enough to bring him fame. But he also started theorizing about its function. What would be the function of the cerebellum? What would the cerebellum do? He started theorizing about the function, which was essentially the territory of the physiologists, the neurophysiologists of the time. Further, he pushed on to retina, the olfactory system, the optic nerve, the spinal cord, everywhere. He had practically conquered some of the major milestones in the nervous system. In the commissural cells of the spinal cord, Cajal observed a conical lump with a peripheral base on the end of the axons, and this structure remained independent of other cells during the course of development. He called this structure as the axonal growth cone, and he described the growth of an axon and the dendrite as if a battering ram was finding its way through, say, a fortress, was making its way through a crowded area, like a car is navigating today among traffic, for example, pushing itself through, like an ambulance is going through heavy traffic, for example, something like that. So, he called this total arborization of a neuron essentially represents the graphic history of the conflicts it suffers during its embryonic life. An absolutely critical observation. This means that the experiences that you have in some sense are encoded in the structure of the neurons is an accepted fact today, something that we now call as one of the pillars of neuroscience as the plasticity. But to come up with this theory in 1890 was absolutely brilliant and absolutely far-sighted for Cajal to come up with this theory in 1890. He said that the conflicts that the neuron suffers through its embryonic life essentially constitute or result in the arborization of the neuron. Today, this is a well accepted fact that maybe not for individual neurons, but for networks of neurons, the experiences that an individual goes through are essentially encoded in the structure of the nervous system. They also to some extent determine how they will respond to future impulses, similar impulses or dissimilar impulses. How do they respond is in some sense defined by what they have gone through. Now, this is common sense today, but it was not so clear in the 1890s to say that essentially this idea of neural plasticity was not so common. So, he started theorizing about function, which is the territory of the neurophysiologist. He was so sure about the structure and anatomy that he could theorize about the function, very critical. Recall that in our studies throughout we are interested in structure function relationships. We are interested in the relationship between structure and function, in the relationship between anatomy and physiology, in the relationship between morphology and control. These are things that are of deep interest for us in this field. So, it is not surprising that a genius like Cajal could come up with some theories of function of the nervous system based on his observations of the structure of the nervous system. Meanwhile, Heinrich Wilhelm Gottfried von Waldeyer-Hartz, Waldeyer, whatever his name is, Waldeyer, wrote a review paper, a 6-part review paper in German Medical Weekly, where he summarized the works of Golgi, Cajal and others, and he requested Albert Kolliker, to be the referee for his work, to sign off on it, to say that whether this is okay or not okay. And in this review, at the end of 1891, Waldeyer termed the independent nerve cell as neuron. This is the first time somebody called the independent nerve cell as neuron. Before that they were called as nerve cells. This term became viral, I mean what we would today call viral, but became very popular in those days, that everybody started calling the independent nerve cell as neuron. So much that many people wrongly attributed the discovery of neuron itself to Voltaire. Remember that he just coined the term, he just called the nerve cell as neuron. It is not his work that proved, that provided evidence for the independence of neuron. That work was done by Cajal, but the language, the name was given by Voltaire. Cajal was not very happy with that situation. Cajal was reminded more fully and somewhat bitterly of his country's language as the medium for holding, let alone catching the scientific ear. The fact that he was from Spain, that he was working in disadvantaged circumstances, he was speaking a language that the others do not speak, was one of the reasons why his own studies and his own brilliance was not so well noticed, whereas someone who summarized his work and just coined a term became more famous than Cajal himself. No, these things happen. Like even today, original works don't become so famous, but copied TikTok videos are viral. Life is like that. But recall that Voltaire himself was a brilliant synthesizer, and he had a gift for naming things. You know, this was his gift. Like Cajal had a gift for rigorous experimentation, Voltaire had a gift for synthesizing and a gift for naming things. So he has also famously named chromosomes. You know, he also famously named chromosomes and neurons. I mean, to imagine that one person could have coined the name for neuron and chromosome is just incredible. It's just astounding just to even think and imagine. So Voltaire himself had some credit to himself as a brilliant synthesizer. So with this we come to the end of this lecture. In this video we looked at a critical, crucial turning point in the personal and professional life of Santiago Ramon y Cajal, where he met Albert Colliker in the meeting at Berlin, and where Colliker was enchanted by the samples and slides that he saw in Cajal's microscope. And Cajal's Palm Sunday years, the 1890 and 1891, through which he provided an enormous body of literature, enormous body of evidence to support his hypothesis that the neurons were indeed independent, and how the brilliant synthesizer that Voltaire was, he was able to name the independent nerve cell as neuron, and how sometimes people even wrongly attribute the discovery of neurons to Voltaire. With this we come to the end of this video. Thank you very much for your attention.